In the quiet, forgotten corners of the world, there are places and people best left undisturbed. Some small towns have secrets, and others have something far worse, a predator hidden behind a mask of art and beauty. In Granite Hollow, the sculptures aren't just made of clay or stone.
The town of Granite Hollow sat in the shadow of its past. Once a bustling mining town, its population dwindled over the years, leaving behind rusted machinery, crumbling buildings, and a strange kind of isolation. The few who remained lived simple, quiet lives, avoiding the old part of town, the part with the old museum. I hadn't planned to visit Granite Hollow. My car broke down on a back road miles from anywhere, and my phone had no signal. After a few hours of walking, I stumbled across the town, a place that seemed frozen in time. There was something about it that felt wrong. But I needed help, so I ignored my gut and made my way into the town center. The first thing I noticed was the sculptures. They were everywhere, on street corners, in shop windows, even in front yards. They were all remarkably lifelike. Frozen in the midst of everyday activities. A man reading a book, a woman sweeping her porch, a child playing with a ball. They were so realistic I half expected them to move. I asked the first person I saw about a mechanic, but the old woman just pointed down the road to the museum. She mumbled something about the sculptor before turning away. The museum. That didn't make sense. But with no other options, I headed in that direction, hoping to find someone who could help. The museum was an enormous Gothic structure, its tall spires casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The sign above the entrance read, "The Granite Hollow Museum of Modern Art," though the building looked anything but modern. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and silence, and the faint scent of something metallic lingered in the air. At the center of the grand hall was the largest, most detailed sculpture I'd ever seen. A man and a woman locked in a dance, their expressions serene, as if frozen in a moment of bliss. The detail was astounding. Every wrinkle, every strand of hair, every vein visible beneath the skin. It was unsettling in its perfection. A voice echoed from behind me. "You like them?" I turned to see a tall, thin man with pale skin and sunken eyes standing in the doorway. His clothes were worn but immaculately clean. He introduced himself as Elias, the museum's curator and the town's mechanic. He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I've kept this museum alive for years. You won't find anything like it anywhere else." I told him about my car, but he insisted on giving me a tour first. His bony hand resting on my shoulder with just enough pressure to make it clear I had no choice. As we walked through the museum, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The sculptures seemed almost too real, too detailed. Each had an expression that was disturbingly lifelike. Some of them with subtle hints of fear, others with surprise, as if they were captured in their final moments of consciousness. Elias spoke with reverence about his art. He said he'd inherited the museum from his father, who had started the collection decades ago. The town, he said, had once been famous for its art, attracting tourists from all over. But over time, the tourists stopped coming and the town faded into obscurity. I noticed something strange then, an odd discoloration on the skin of one of the statues, like a bruise. My heart began to race as I studied it closer. The texture wasn't quite like stone, and the expression on the figure's face, it looked almost too pained. I tried to excuse myself, but Elias was quick to block my path. "Stay a little longer," he whispered, his voice a mix of charm and menace. "There's something I want to show you. In the basement." My stomach dropped. I knew I should run, but something about the way he spoke kept me rooted in place, like a moth drawn to a flame. He led me down a narrow staircase, his steps slow and deliberate, each one echoing off the cold stone walls. At the bottom he flicked on a dim light, revealing a workshop filled with tools, scalpels, chisels, strange mechanical devices, and in the center of the room, a table. On that table was a half-finished sculpture, a person, or what used to be a person. Their eyes were open, glassy with terror, their mouth frozen in a silent scream. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat as the realization hit me. These weren't sculptures, they were people. Elias smiled wider, his teeth sharp and yellow. You're starting to understand, aren't you? This town, my museum, it's my masterpiece. Every person you've seen, every sculpture, they're my work, perfectly preserved. He moved toward me and I felt cold sweat drip down my back. I bolted for the stairs, but Elias was faster than I expected. His long fingers grazed my arm, pulling me back just as I reached the top. My heart pounded in my ears as I wrestled free, running blindly through the dark halls of the museum. I burst out of the front door, not stopping until I reached the edge of town. Behind me in the distance, I could still hear Elias's voice, soft and taunting. Don't worry, he called. You'll come back, they always do. And when you do, I'll make sure you're remembered. Forever.
Granite Hollow is just a speck on the map, a town forgotten by time. But if you ever find yourself there, stay far away from the museum. Elias is always looking for new additions to his collection. And in Granite Hollow, art is more than just expression, it's a death sentence.